Beyond relationships, there are all sorts of other issues created by such a dramatic gender imbalance. Well, joining me now is Haiyan Wang, Managing Partner at the China India Institute, to talk more about this. Thanks for joining us. Let's put this into some kind of context. For decades, there's been this one-child policy in China. Now it's changing. What is it changing to?
It is, currently the policy is that couples are only allowed one child unless you are from a minority group, or if you live in a rural side where your firstborn is a girl, or both parents are sole children. The new policy is if one of the partners of the couple is one child, you are allowed to have a second child. Essentially, it is losing up the one-child policy to let couples where one partner is one child to have the second child.
Right, and looking at the policy as it's been implemented so far, I was wondering, to what extent is this a cultural phenomenon? I mean, is there a stigma against having girls in China? Why is there a preference for boys?
Well, I think that very much. It's thousands of years of old, I think, a cultural tradition or cultural beliefs that only boys can carry on the family's bloodline. Right. That, you see emperors passing on the crown to the boys, not to the girls. And surprisingly, even though China has developed so much into a modern society, a lot of people still hold that belief that the surnames, the family's glory can only be carried on by boys.
We had that startling figure, which we mentioned right at the outset there, 30 million unmarried Chinese men in the country by 2020. Surely that is going to have social impact, cultural impact, economic impact.
Absolutely. Well, I tell you one impact, it's going to drive up the value of girls for sure, and that's not a bad thing for girls. More scarcity, higher value. But really, all of these millions of men, single men, it is an unstable force. They're young and hopefully they're employed. If you have young and unemployed, or those who tends to be in a lower income class tends to be unmarried because it's harder for them to find a mate. And that is a very unstable social force for sure.
If we just widen the situation out a bit more in Asia, in China you have 120 men for every 100 women.
Yes.
In India you have 112 men for every 100 women. I mean, is that particularly unique to Asia?
I for sure, for China and India, both countries. And I think that that is a general truth perhaps for developing countries, because developing countries where, a lot of the poorer families rely on male to do the hard labor. And of course, having a male is a workforce in a household. That probably is deriving a lot from that. As people's income go up, they tend to be a little bit more equal in their thinking towards girls and boys.
Right, but are attitudes changing? I mean, one of the big things happening in China right now, which we talk about very often, is this massive urbanization, people moving to the cities. Is there more mobility for women now in China?
Oh, definitely. I think that there's more mobility because of urbanization, and also because of higher education.
Right.
And if you go to colleges, there is about 50% boys versus girls, perhaps even higher for girls. So as China's working force population started to slowly decline, and then whatever labor force is a good labor force, especially a well-educated one, that will certainly increase the status of women in a society.
Right, and the other problem that we talked about, which is the gender selection abortion, I mean, that is a serious problem, but it is something that is not easy to enforce, is it?
It is not easy to enforce, but I think that the new child policy, the loosening up of the child policy, allowing a family to have a second chance to have a boy, that may help to some extent reduce that phenomenon to some extent. And as people's education level and income level started to increase, hopefully their mindset will change as well.
Haiyan Wang, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.